Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Talk FGO 1TED, the show where we let you know if you want to roll that 5-star. Well, it's time to field the famous cavalry. The Tiger of Kai is here. So if this is your first time watching Wanted, we're going to talk history, lore, mechanics, and more about a new limited 5-star rider, Takeda Shingen, for the new upcoming Guda Guda Super Goryokaku. Sometimes I do these intros and I don't say why the servant is coming out. Anyway, that's that. So, not a long intro. Let's get into the potatoes. Alright. Most commonly known as Takeda Shingen, but actual formal name, Takeda Harunobu, was born December 1st, 1521. I had to resist myself to do a joke there. Died May 13th, 1573. Was a member of the Takeda clan, rulers of the province of Kai during the late Sengoku period. The name Shingen is a Dharma name. It's given to adherents of Buddhism. It can be used by both monastics and lay people. It's just, a general sign of devotion. And, of course, it is a pun, because the kanji in Shingen can be pronounced as Nobuharu, which, of course, is Harunobu reversed. And the Takeda were descendants of the Minamoto clan, so in imperial documents, he was named Minamoto no Harunobu. So, Shingen was the firstborn son of Takeda Nobutora, and he won his first battle at Unnokuchi in 1536, approximately age 15, in a daring case where his men at the rear guard held out during a retreat, and then waited until the enemy's garrison were out of their castle pursuing them, then immediately turned around and pressed them once they were free of the defensive formation. So, had some early military strategy already. After coming of age, Shingen ended up ousting his father, Nobutora, and became daimyo of the clan by 1541. The exact reason isn't documented, at least it's not said to be documented in sources in English. You never know when looking up foreign language sources. Somebody just hasn't gotten around to putting it in English language websites to check. But it's believed that Nobutora was going to name his second son Nobushige as heir, so Shingen ousted him and forced him to retire to Suruga province. After this leadership change, Shingen began a protracted campaign in the neighboring Shinano province. The first battle of this campaign was the famous Battle of Seizawa, where Shingen managed to defeat a coalition of the Shinano warlords, 3,000 to 12,000, using an advantage of timing. He launched a night raid in the rain, very risky, but it managed to, completely take his enemies by surprise. So this led Shingen to a pitched but ultimately victorious campaign in Shinano, where he generally held success, had many back and forths, especially with the Murakami clan daimyo, Yoshikayo, and it got so bad that in 1553, Yoshikayo fled to the neighboring FGO province and begged for aid from its daimyo, Usugi Kenshin, who took him as a retainer. This begins one of the Sengoku period's classic grudge matches. The Tiger of Kai and the Dragon of Echigo face off in a series of battles in Kawanakajima. The fighting is fierce, but both the commanders are very careful not to be drawn into a single decisive battle. They make sure not to overcommit, so they could be defeated entirely. So they end up fighting multiple times, dramatic back and forth for years. There's either 4 or 5 battles of Kawanakajima, if you want to get technical. The most dramatic and famous is probably the 4th one, where the Usugi forces cleared a line through the Takeda forces, and according to popular accounts, Kenshin and Shingen actually engaged in personal combat, Kenshin with his sword and Shingen with his war fan. This battle was also pretty hard on the Takeda because it led to the death of Shingen's brother Nobushige, who was still one of his most trusted generals. But Shingen managed to keep Kenshin from taking Shinano. He was forced to reprioritize because of several plots against him, including by his own son, and eventually launching campaigns on Kozuke. And in 1560, he allied himself with the Oda and Tokugawa factions to capture the Suruga province from the Imagawa clan, who had previously been his allies. However, they embargoed him on salt, which was kind of a big deal. That said, while it's kind of understandable to get them back for the embargo, the act of moving on the Imagawa seems to have annoyed several people across Japan. His previous allies during the Kozuke campaign, the Hojo, objected to the invasion of Suruga and broke off their alliance. Tokugawa Ieyasu, the Tanuki himself, thinking that Shingen was doomed, also turned on him by working with the Hojo and Uesugi clans. And Shingen was only able to escape being surrounded on 3 sides by asking for intervention from Oda Nobunaga himself, who managed to mollify Ieyasu and get the Uesugi to back down, leaving only the Hojo to conflict with, which Shingen and the Takeda ultimately won with. And things proceed for several years, but in 1572, Shingen decides to move to counteract Nobunaga, who is, working on his grand unification of Japan at this stage. Ends up taking some castles from him in the Tokugawa, which obviously soured the alliance, and then ultimately made a push for Kyoto at the urging of the last Ashikaga shogun, Yoshiaki. And during this time, Shingen managed to give Tokugawa Ieyasu his most notable defeat at Mikatakahara, the best example, according to sources, of Shingen's cavalry tactics. Basically, he made good use of maneuvering and wave tactics to overcome arquebusiers. The common wisdom was that an arquebus line would deter a cavalry charge, so Shingen made careful use of flanking, two-pronged attacks, and just keeping units in reserve, letting them rest up so he can sortie more frequently. Sorry, that's the sound of me speaking into my water bottle. I shouldn't do the take while doing that. Now, Shingen would unfortunately die in 1573, though the exact circumstances of his death are not known. Some sources claim he died of pneumonia, others say he died as a result of an injury, being shot by a sniper at the siege of Noda Castle. And this would unfortunately end the military might of the Takeda, as his son would go on to get absolutely pantsed by Nobunaga's three-line formation at Nagashino. By the way, to keep you up on the rivalry, when Shingen went to war against Nobunaga, Kenshin reportedly wrote, "Shingen has poked his hand into a hornet's nest. He is finished. This is fortunate for our Uesugi clan." But also is said to have wept when he died. Shingen is also arguably the reason for the Demon King of Sixth Heaven line. In a letter exchange with Nobunaga, he signed his own name and title as head of the Tendai sect Shingen, causing Nobunaga to reply with the infamous Dairokuten no Mao Nobunaga line. Shingen was not actually head of the Tendai sect, as far as I could see, so it was probably just a pissing contest. Nobunaga being famously against several Buddhist temples and sects of monks, especially those that were armed. That said, I also found some attestations that some historians do think that maybe Tokugawa Ieyasu's ultimate success lies in the fact that while he was not his direct heir, he was kind of a spiritual successor to Takeda Shingen, because after the defeat of the Takeda clan, Ieyasu concealed many Takeda retainers from Nobunaga when he called for their deaths, and they all ended up swearing loyalty to him, and he ended up employing several aspects of statecraft and administration from Takeda's Kai province. Still, Shingen is massively influential and famous for a Sengoku period figure. He's depicted or homaged in all kinds of ways in fiction and in, historical reenactments of fiction, that sort of stuff. Many, 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 many depictions in dramas, books, games, anime, whatever. And as an example, he and his quote-unquote 24 generals were a popular theme in Edo period art, for instance. Not that he only had 24 generals, but as a mark of the quality of his leadership, there were at least 24 documented good commanders under him. Usually not all at once. Honestly, as a complete aside, which is definitely not to pad this section out, I feel like these days the lore section of the video, with the capital L, isn't as important or clearly defined, because I feel like it's like 8 out of 10 odds that a character is first appearing in FGO, as opposed to the early days where it was a pretty solid coin flip if they showed up in Fate before somewhere, even if it wasn't, widely known to the Western audience. But structurally, it's still important to keep here because it's here to talk about weird Nasuverse isms. And obviously, if they're an original character who has no real-life history or folklore, it's very important. When that happens, the history section is basically useless. Anyway. The FGO depiction of Takeda Shingen is shockingly normal for them. His higher ascensions are based on depictions and modern replicas of Shingen's historical armor. The shoulders in Ascension 3 are perhaps a little World of Warcraft compared to his real life. But no, there's actual depictions, artistry from various eras, and modern replicas of the armor he was supposed to have worn. So they have some sources to base it on. His noble phantasm, RIN KA ZAN, is also based in actual history as well, though of course in the Fate way. No historical attestations that he could throw mountains or shoot horses of fire at people. But RIN KA ZAN is the 4-character way to write a famous series of lines which were actually on Takeda Shingen's banners, the 4 characters being Wind, Forest, Fire, Mountain, and is based on lines from Sun Tzu's Art of War. Technically 2 separate lines combined, but don't quibble with me. The full text is usually quoted as and translated as, "Be like a wind in a rapid march, a woods or a forest in a steady march, a fire in a raid, a mountain in a standoff." Also, this does mean, by the way, that if you're curious, it's not necessarily a new thing that people, are really into the Art of War. This, at least, is about military strategy and not applying the stratagems to, business school, I guess. And Shingen did actually have the extended quote written on his banners in the war. The 4-character version seems to be a modern invention. People first used that as an abbreviation, I think, last century. I didn't see any mention of it before then. RIN KA ZAN is also the name of a Yu-Gi-Oh card, by the way. How's that for trivia? But yes, the actual quote is from Shingen. And I don't know if it is directly related, but the Takeda family mon is the series of 4 diamonds. So the symbolism all flows together pretty well. There's, 4 sections of the quote. There's 4 characters, 4 elements, etc. It, works out really well, even if it wasn't intentional that it do that way. Also, Fate claims that Takeda studied magecraft in his desire to be unrivaled. Though he doesn't make a lot of use of it, he is supposed to have some pretty good magic circuits. Now, I did go through that whole spiel about how usually characters first appear in FGO these days. Technically, Takeda Shingen did actually appear a little bit before this Guda Guda event, though I want to say only just in terms of timing, in Guda Guda Taiko Legend Zipang. Some of those are all caps, which was a comic series published in Comptique and also online from 2022 to 23. The Tankobon compilation, the print compilation, would have just come out right about when this Super Goryakaku event came out in JP 2 years ago, so I guess keep your eyes peeled for advertisement of a thing you can't buy. But yes, the timing would have been that this was very close to when the event launched in JP. And of course, the story of this is another Guda Guda alternate telling of a Sengoku period Grail War in which Shingen is summoned as a servant, and still in that Guda Guda art style. Also, I believe his depiction is more like the second Ascension one, but still, some elements there. Probably would have had some of the starting design on his character before they actually went through with it. And also, obviously, as such a famous character, with other Sengoku-era warlords appearing, Shingen's been referenced before by the likes of Nobu and Kagetora and so on. He's going to be a major character in Super Goryakaku, but is likely to poke his head in future Gudas. We have, I want to say, basically 3-ish eras that Guda Guda usually borrows from, so anytime when you're doing Sengoku stuff, he's liable to show up at least as a cameo, or maybe as a one-off, boss fight in a bonus quest or something. Also, extra fun fact that's not written in the script, but the same artist as Himiko, and the artist gave him kind of a similar hairstyle, but not quite the same. Not quite the same elements. And you can't tell I had to do that a second time, because I forgot to turn my mic back on. Anyway, alrighty, it's time for mechanics. They're very straightforward. Takeda's a 5-star rider. He's leaning a little bit more on attack than HP, but he's not to either extreme. Comfortably behind the line in both areas, but not so far behind. He is, however, the first rider to like red so much that he's quick arts buster. Real gorilla hours here. Good hits in NP gen as a result. He's got 4s all around and got a very solid NP gain to make up for the fact that he is triple buster. His Noble Phantasm is the aforementioned RIN KA ZAN. It's a pretty nasty AoE buster, so it hits enemies with NP seal for 1 turn first, and then an overcharge-based arts buster and quick res down, then deals damage. That's also first. The card resistance down is only for 1 turn, but it's 20 to 40%, so you'll have some room to play with that. The default is that he's hitting somebody with 20% down all the time, and then it could be higher based on overcharge. First skill's Charisma Adjacent. It's very straightforward, 10 to 20% attack up for the team for 3, gives a chosen ally -1 skill cooldown. Second skill is also very basic but very useful. It's the 30 to 50% battery, and a 20 to 30% buster up for 3 turns on self, also generates 10 to 20 stars right away. Final skill is arguably a monster of defense. It's 3 hits, 3 turns of invul, and 3 turns of 300 to 500 damage cut straight up, just all damage is cut by 500. It also is a 20 to 30% NP gain up for 3 turns. So again, he's already got above average NP gain. You combine it with this skill, and he should generate pretty strongly. Passives are Riding A, so he's 1 quick packs a punch, a special Takeda territory creation for a little bit of arts up and 10% crit resistance at all time, and just magic resistance D for a little bit of debuff resistance. Now, if the fact that I basically speed ran his entire kit in, probably like less than a minute, you can probably tell that his role is pretty obvious. He's an AoE sweeper, you use him to clear waves. He's got a 50% battery, he has damage amps, he has solid stats. If anybody lives, he has buster cards to follow along after. They're taking, 20% buster down for him to smack the shit out of him. Now, buster AoE sweepers are kind of a dime a dozen for riders, it feels, but he does fulfill this role in a modern team comp pretty well. I want to say, jumping straight to allies here, the main thing is that his own skills are all on a 6-turn cooldown, and he has his own -1 turn cooldown effect. So he is an excellent unit to pair with Double Coin of Light for the Buster Reload strat, basically 2 Koyans can give you, minus the skill cooldowns, then he gives himself another minus. Then by the time, all the turns go by, he should be good. Plus, they each have a 50% battery. He's got his own 50% battery. You can combine this with a CE, and you should be able to do most of the stuff later, so long as you got a decent amount of refund. He doesn't slack, though, in boss fights. He can work as a great opening axe to a single target NP, and has crazy good defense for longevity. 3 hits, 3 turns of invul, and then even if your opponent ignores all that or chews through it all, just passive, even if it's only 500, the damage cut can add up. Other units to pair him with are probably some fairly generic supporters leaning on the Buster side. Waver, obviously, is, very card agnostic and gives generally good buffs. Merlin is good for Buster units because he gives you big crit buffs, big Buster buffs, and also has his own hard defense. Osakawa Hime, got hybrided to be Quick Buster. And Sima Yi is basically the same kind of generic support Waver has, but in Rider format. So fairly generic combos of battery and powers up. And genuinely, for pairing him with an attacker, it does not matter because he gives all 3 card resistances down, and his only team-wide buff is attack up, so he can slot basically anywhere. For CEs you're looking for, there's a wealth of them. Since he's got the 50% up, he can make use of a lot of those 50% CEs, such as the Golden Sumo, the Aerial Drive, etc. I'd also recommend cards like Demonic Bodhisattva and the like. The Overcharge effect can give him some real heat to his NP, so actually getting those Overcharge levels stacked up so you can do the big card reduction before he hits is good. Generally, though, you're going to aim for Buster NP up. He's going to be firing his NP, you're going to try and get him to refire. Maybe you plug suit some stuff around. He should be pretty serviceable at that. So for the famed other stuff, Ascension's pretty simple. Very normal mats, all of them are part 1 mats. His basic skills are also pretty old school. The newest they need is Oni Lanterns. And he does need a total of 30 of those, but that shouldn't be too hard to swing. The beauty of, I guess, not needing a single bronze mat, at least in his normal skills. And Append is a different one. Now, I do want to warn you, Shingen is actually kind of a semi-rare pull. You're going to see him in the upcoming Guda Guda. You're not going to see him again for at least a year, barring EN, kindness. But obviously, this year in JP, the big finale of Part 2 year, we've just been firing, banners for everybody left and right. So there's a Rider Weekly campaign, the second one. There's a Grand Dual Rider campaign for Pilgrimage Festival 11, which is, I'm pretty sure, the welfare from this event came back. He's in it. I'm pretty sure also he's gotten some other ones that even I haven't been able to keep track of, but it's a lot of rate-ups. For EN, keep an eye out for a return maybe in back-to-school or Thanksgiving period. Thanksgiving would be an appropriate time to throw in an extra banner they didn't get to in JP. And he is a limited SSR, so you'll see him in Lucky Bag campaigns of all sorts in the future. And that's it. It's relatively simple, it's straightforward, and it's red. It's very red. Anyway, come back in like a week for basically Part 2, because guess what? It's going to be Usugi Kenshin time. So that means that's going to be the end of this video. Be sure to fire up the old like. I don't really know what happened with YouTube's, hyping feature, but if you see that button, press that too. Drop your comments in the comment section down below, or join our Discord. Has many lovely functions, including a rolling thread if you want to post your roll results. Make sure you're subbed to get more. Like I said, there's going to be another one of these in 5 to 7 days. Have fun with that. Consider joining the channel memberships, and also supporting us on Patreon. Could have got this episode early. We'll have more of a shout-out for our patrons in just a second after the musical outro. And before we go, a quick shout out to all of our patrons, but especially Added Harp, Black Stogie, Call Me Zed, Carlos, Dragon, JW9000, Crystallight, Rise of Kenji, Rogue Robin, and Charvor. If you like what we do and want to see us do more, consider supporting us on Patreon. Bye-bye.